You will not believe what happens to the girl at the end. Make sure to like and subscribe so we can continue writing stories like this one. I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.
Lydia lived in a house so big you could get lost in it. Marble floors echoed with every step and giant windows looked out onto perfectly trimmed gardens. She had more dresses than she could count, and she went to fancy parties almost every night. Everyone thought she was lucky. She had lots of money after her husband passed away. But Lydia wasn't happy. The parties were loud, but she felt lonely. The food was delicious, but it didn't taste good to her. The beautiful dresses felt heavy, like they were weighing her down. The silence in her big house at night was deafening. It was like the marble walls were trapping all the sadness inside. She tried everything to fill the emptiness. She bought more jewels, she traveled to faraway lands, and she even adopted a fluffy white dog named Snowball. But nothing seemed to work. The emptiness was still there, a big hole in her heart that no amount of money could fill. She wondered if she would ever feel happy again. She longed for something real, something that wasn't just shiny and expensive. She wanted a connection, a friendship, a reason to smile that wasn't just for show. Little did she know the answer to her loneliness was growing just next door in a small field of green. A field she'd barely even noticed, owned by a man she'd never met. A man named Jacob. Jacob's farm was nothing like Lydia's estate. It was small, with a simple wooden fence surrounding a field of tall, green corn stalks. His house was a cozy little cottage, painted a cheerful yellow. He didn't have fancy cars or sparkling jewels. He had dirt under his fingernails and a smile that reached all the way to his eyes. He spent his days working in the field, planting seeds, pulling weeds, and watching the corn grow tall. He loved the feel of the sun on his skin and the smell of the earth after the rain. He found happiness in the simple things, like the buzzing of bees and the chirping of crickets. Lydia had barely noticed Jacob's farm before. From her high windows, it just looked like a patch of green next to her perfectly manicured lawn. She never thought about who owned it or what they did there. She was too busy worrying about her own problems to pay attention to anything else. Sometimes she would see Jacob in the distance working in his field. He always seemed to be smiling, even when the sun was blazing hot. She wondered what he was so happy about. What could possibly be so great about growing corn? She couldn't understand it. She had everything money could buy, and she was miserable. He had almost nothing, and he seemed content. It didn't make sense. One sunny afternoon, Lydia decided to drive into town to buy some new hats. She loved hats. They were another way to try and fill that empty spot inside. She put on her fanciest hat, a big one with feathers and ribbons, and climbed into her shiny red car. As she drove down the long driveway, the car started to make a funny noise. It sputtered and coughed, and then it stopped completely, right in front of Jacob's farm. Lydia sighed. Of all the places to break down, it had to be here. She tried to start the car again, but it wouldn't budge. She didn't know anything about cars. She usually just called someone to fix them, but her phone had no signal. She was stuck. Just then, she saw Jacob walking towards her from the field. He had a friendly smile on his face and a big straw hat on his head. "Looks like you're having some trouble," he said, his voice warm and kind. Lydia felt a little embarrassed. Here she was, in her fancy hat and expensive dress, stranded in front of his simple farm. "Yes," she said. "My car won't start, and I don't know what to do." Jacob chuckled. "Well, let's take a look," he said. "I might not know much about fancy cars, but I know a thing or two about engines." He bent down and peered under the hood. Lydia watched him, feeling a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could help her. Jacob tinkered with the engine for a while, his brow furrowed in concentration. He checked the wires, the hoses, and the battery. Lydia watched him, trying to stay out of the way. She didn't understand anything he was doing, but she appreciated his effort. After a few minutes, Jacob wiped his hands on a rag and straightened up. "I think I know what the problem is," he said. "It's just a loose wire. I can fix it, but it'll take a few minutes." Lydia was relieved. "Oh, thank you," she said. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Jacob smiled. "It's no problem," he said. "I'm always happy to help." He went back to work, and Lydia watched him, feeling a strange sense of peace. There was something comforting about his calm demeanor and his quiet confidence. While Jacob was fixing the car, he started talking about his farm. He told Lydia about the corn he was growing, how he planted the seeds in the spring, and how he watched them grow taller every day. He talked about the importance of sunshine and rain, and how he loved the feeling of the earth between his fingers. Lydia listened, fascinated. She had never heard anyone talk about farming with such passion. It was clear that Jacob truly loved what he did. And as she listened, she began to see his farm in a new light. It wasn't just a patch of green next to her lawn. It was a place of life, of growth, of hard work and simple joy. All fixed, Jacob announced, wiping his hands once more. He stepped back, and Lydia cautiously turned the key. The engine purred to life. "Oh, Jacob, thank you so much," she exclaimed, relief washing over her. "How can I ever repay you?" Jacob shrugged. "No need to repay me," he said. "Just glad I could help." "But," he added with a twinkle in his eye, "if you're really curious, I could show you around the cornfield. It's looking especially fine this year." Lydia hesitated. She was dressed in her fancy clothes, and her shoes weren't exactly made for walking through a field. But something about Jacob's invitation was appealing. She wanted to see what he was so passionate about. "Okay," she said. "I'd like that very much." Jacob grinned and led her through the gate and into the cornfield. The stalks towered over her, their leaves rustling in the breeze. It was like stepping into a green maze. Jacob pointed out the plump ears of corn, explaining how they would ripen and be ready for harvest in the fall. He talked about the different kinds of birds that nested in the field and the little animals that scurried among the rows. He showed her how to tell if the corn was getting enough water and how to protect it from pests. Lydia listened, amazed by his knowledge and his love for the land. She had never seen anyone so connected to nature. She realized that Jacob's happiness didn't come from money or fancy things. It came from the simple joy of working with the earth and watching things grow. It was a kind of happiness she had never known. Walking through the cornfield with Jacob, Lydia began to truly understand something important. She had always believed that money was the key to happiness. She thought that if she had enough of it, she could buy anything she wanted and everything would be perfect. But seeing Jacob's joy, she realized she was wrong. Jacob didn't have much money. His clothes were simple, his house was small, and he didn't own any fancy jewels. But he had something that Lydia didn't. He had purpose. He had a connection to the earth, and he found fulfillment in his work. He woke up every morning with a reason to smile, a reason to get out of bed and work hard. Lydia realized that she had been chasing the wrong things. She had been so focused on acquiring wealth that she had forgotten what truly mattered: simple joys, meaningful connections, and a sense of purpose. As they walked back towards the gate, Lydia made a decision. She wanted to learn more about Jacob's world. She wanted to experience the kind of happiness that he had. She didn't know how to start, but she knew she had to try. "Jacob," she said, stopping in front of the gate, "would you mind if I came back sometime? I'd like to learn more about farming." Jacob's eyes lit up. "I'd like that very much, Lydia," he said. "Anytime you want to come, you're welcome here." And with that, a new chapter in Lydia's life began. A chapter filled with the promise of simple joys and the possibility of true happiness. Lydia started visiting Jacob's farm every day. At first, she felt a little awkward. She didn't know anything about farming. She was used to being waited on, not getting her hands dirty. But Jacob was patient and kind, and he showed her everything she needed to know. He taught her how to plant seeds, carefully placing them in the ground and covering them with soil. He showed her how to water the plants, making sure they got just the right amount. He explained how to pull weeds, identifying the ones that were harmful and the ones that were harmless. Lydia was surprised by how much she enjoyed it. It was hard work, but it was also satisfying. She loved feeling the earth between her fingers, and she loved watching the plants grow. She even started to like getting dirty. It was a different kind of dirty than she was used to, not the kind from spilled food at a fancy party, but the kind that came from working with the earth. She learned about different kinds of vegetables, not just corn. Jacob showed her how to grow tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers. He explained how each plant had its own needs and how important it was to pay attention to the details. Lydia realized that farming wasn't just about growing food. It was about connecting with nature, about learning about the world around her, and about working hard to create something beautiful and useful. It was a whole new world, and she was eager to explore it. She traded her fancy lace gloves for sturdy work gloves, ready to get her hands dirty and learn everything Jacob could teach her. Lydia was eager to help, but at first, she wasn't very good at it. When she tried to plant seeds, she either put them in too deep or not deep enough. When she watered the plants, she either gave them too much water or not enough. And when she tried to pull weeds, she often ended up pulling out the plants she was supposed to be protecting. One day, she was trying to plant tomato seedlings. She carefully dug a hole, placed the seedling inside, and covered it with soil. But she pressed down too hard, and the seedling snapped in half. "Oh no!" she cried, feeling terrible. "I killed it." Jacob chuckled. "Don't worry," he said. "It happens. Farming takes practice." He showed her how to gently loosen the soil around the roots of the seedling before planting it and how to water it carefully so it wouldn't get shocked. Another time, she was trying to weed the rows of carrots. She was so focused on pulling out the weeds that she didn't notice she was also pulling out the tiny carrot plants. "Lydia," Jacob said gently, "those are carrots." Lydia blushed. "Oh dear," she said. "I'm so sorry. I can't seem to do anything right." Jacob smiled. "You're doing fine," he said. "Just remember to take your time and pay attention to what you're doing. And don't be afraid to ask for help. I'm here to teach you." Lydia appreciated his patience. She knew she had a lot to learn, but she was determined to get better. She wanted to prove to herself and to Jacob that she could do more than just wear fancy dresses and go to parties. She wanted to be a part of something real, something meaningful. And she was willing to work hard to achieve it. Cobb's patience seemed endless. He never got frustrated with Lydia even when she made mistakes. He understood that she was new to farming and that it would take time for her to learn. He always explained things clearly and simply, and he never made her feel foolish for asking questions. He showed her how to prepare the soil, tilling it and adding compost to make it rich and fertile. He taught her how to plant seeds at the right depth and spacing so they would have enough room to grow. He explained how to water the plants properly, giving them enough moisture without drowning them. He even taught her how to identify different kinds of bugs, the helpful ones and the harmful ones. He showed her how to use natural methods to control pests instead of relying on harsh chemicals. He believed in working with nature, not against it. Jacob always made sure Lydia understood why she was doing something, not just how to do it. He explained the science behind farming, the way plants grew, and the importance of the ecosystem. He helped her see the farm as a living, breathing thing, not just a place to grow food. He praised her efforts even when they weren't perfect. He celebrated her successes, no matter how small. He made her feel like she was contributing something valuable to the farm. And most importantly, he made her feel like she was capable of learning and growing. He believed in her even when she didn't believe in herself. His kindness and patience were exactly what Lydia needed to blossom, just like the plants in his field. Soon, Lydia found herself looking forward to her days on the farm more than anything else. The fancy parties that used to fill her calendar now seemed dull and meaningless. The glittering jewels and beautiful dresses no longer held any appeal. She realized that the true treasures weren't things you could buy, but experiences you shared and the connections you made. Instead of spending hours getting ready for a party, she would wake up early and head straight to the farm. She loved the feeling of the sun on her skin and the smell of the fresh earth. She loved watching the plants grow, knowing that she had played a part in their journey. She loved working alongside Jacob, learning from him and sharing stories and laughter. She started declining invitations to parties, much to the surprise of her friends. They couldn't understand why she would choose to spend her time getting dirty on a farm instead of socializing with them. They gossiped about her, wondering if she had lost her mind. But Lydia didn't care what they thought. She was happier than she had been in years. She had finally found something that gave her life meaning, something that filled the empty space in her heart. The silence in her big house was no longer deafening, because now it was filled with the memories of laughter and shared experiences on the farm. The marble walls no longer felt like they were trapping sadness, because now they were echoing with joy. She had traded the superficial glamour of her old life for the simple, honest beauty of the farm, and she had never been happier. She was finally home. Lydia's former friends couldn't understand her new life. They saw her as someone who had gone crazy, throwing away her wealth and status for a life of dirt and hard work. They would whisper behind her back at parties, making fun of her stained clothes and calloused hands. "Look at Lydia," they would say, their voices dripping with sarcasm. "She used to be so elegant. Now she looks like a peasant." They would laugh at her, pointing out the dirt under her fingernails and the wrinkles on her face that had been caused by the sun. They couldn't comprehend that she was happier now than she had ever been before. They only saw the surface, the dirt and the sweat, and they didn't understand the joy that lay beneath. Some of them even tried to intervene, inviting her to fancy dinners and urging her to return to her old life. They told her she was wasting her time on the farm and that she should be enjoying her money. "Lydia, darling," one of them said, "you're still young. You should be traveling the world, buying beautiful things and having fun. Why are you spending your days toiling in the fields like a common laborer?" Lydia would simply smile and shake her head. "I am having fun," she would say. "I've never been happier in my life." And she would walk away, leaving them to their gossip and their empty lives. She knew that they would never understand, and she didn't need them to. She had found her own happiness, and that was all that mattered. She knew now that their laughter came from a place of their own unhappiness and their inability to understand true joy. Lydia had spent so many years trying to please other people, trying to fit into their world of wealth and glamour. She had dressed the way they wanted her to dress, acted the way they wanted her to act, and said the things they wanted her to say. She had lived her life according to their expectations, and it had left her feeling empty and unfulfilled. But now, for the first time in a long time, she was living her life for herself. She was doing what made her happy, regardless of what anyone else thought. She didn't care if her clothes were stained or her hands were calloused. She didn't care if her friends laughed at her or gossiped about her. All that mattered was that she was finally happy. She woke up every morning with a sense of purpose, a feeling of excitement that she hadn't experienced in years. She looked forward to spending her days on the farm, working alongside Jacob and learning about the natural world. She felt alive, connected, and fulfilled. The opinions of her former friends seemed trivial and insignificant in comparison. Their laughter was just noise, their gossip just empty words. She had found something real, something meaningful, and she wasn't going to let anyone take that away from her. She had spent so long trying to find happiness in the wrong places, and now that she had finally found it, she was determined to hold onto it with all her might. She had discovered that true happiness came from within, not from external validation or material possessions. She was free. One evening, the sky turned a menacing shade of gray. The wind howled and the trees swayed violently. The air was thick with humidity and the smell of rain was heavy in the air. Lydia and Jacob knew that a big storm was coming. They listened to the weather forecast on Jacob's old radio, their faces growing more concerned with each passing minute. The forecast predicted heavy rain, strong winds, and even the possibility of hail. A storm like that could devastate Jacob's corn crop, wiping out months of hard work in a single night. Jacob looked worried. His corn crop was his livelihood, his source of income for the entire year. If the storm destroyed it, he didn't know what he would do. Lydia felt a surge of protectiveness towards Jacob and his farm. She had grown to love the land, and she couldn't bear the thought of seeing it destroyed. She knew that they had to do something to protect the corn, but she didn't know what. "What can we do?" she asked Jacob, her voice filled with anxiety. "How can we save the corn?" Jacob thought for a moment, his brow furrowed in concentration. "We can try to prop up the stalks," he said. "If we tie them together, they might be able to withstand the wind." It was a long shot, but it was worth a try. They knew that they had to work quickly before the storm hit. They gathered ropes and stakes and headed out into the field, ready to face the storm head-on. The storm was coming, and they had to be ready. They had to protect the harvest. The storm hit with full force. The rain poured down in sheets, soaking them to the bone. The wind howled like a hungry wolf, tearing at their clothes and whipping the corn stalks back and forth. Lightning flashed across the sky, illuminating the field in brief, eerie bursts of light. Lydia and Jacob worked tirelessly, their hands numb with cold and their bodies aching with exhaustion. They tied the corn stalks together in small groups, hoping to give them the strength to withstand the wind. They hammered stakes into the ground, anchoring the ropes and providing extra support. The mud sucked at their boots, making each step a struggle. The wind threatened to knock them off their feet. But they kept going, driven by their determination to save the corn. They worked side by side, their movements synchronized, their spirits united. They didn't speak much, but they didn't need to. They understood each other, sharing a common goal and a deep connection to the land. As the night wore on, the storm raged on. But Lydia and Jacob refused to give up. They knew that every stalk they saved was a victory, a testament to their hard work and their unwavering commitment. Finally, as the first rays of dawn peeked over the horizon, the storm began to subside. The rain slowed to a drizzle, the wind died down, and the sky began to lighten. Lydia and Jacob stood in the middle of the field, exhausted but triumphant. They had made it through the night. They had faced the storm together, and they had survived. They had saved the corn. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting a golden glow over the cornfield, Lydia surveyed the scene. The corn stalks were still standing tall, their leaves glistening with raindrops. They had done it. They had saved the harvest. She turned to Jacob, her heart swelling with gratitude and admiration. His face was streaked with mud, his hair was disheveled, and his clothes were torn. But his eyes were shining with joy and relief. He looked at her, and a slow smile spread across his face. In that moment, something shifted within Lydia. She realized that she was falling in love with Jacob. It wasn't just gratitude or admiration. It was something deeper, something more profound. She loved his kindness, his patience, his unwavering optimism. She loved his connection to the land, his passion for farming, and his simple, honest way of life. She had spent so many years searching for love in the wrong places, looking for someone who could give her wealth, status, or excitement. But she had finally found love in the most unexpected place, in a muddy cornfield with a simple farmer who had shown her the beauty of true happiness. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that she wanted to spend it with Jacob. She wanted to continue learning from him, working alongside him, and sharing her life with him. She wanted to build a life with him, a life filled with love, laughter, and the simple joys of the farm. She took a step closer to Jacob, her hand reaching out to touch his. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice filled with emotion. "Thank you for showing me what true love really means." Cobb's heart skipped a beat when Lydia reached for his hand. He had been trying to ignore the feelings that had been growing inside him for weeks, afraid that he wasn't good enough for her. He was just a simple farmer, and she was a wealthy widow. He assumed she would never be interested in someone like him. But as he looked into her eyes, he saw something different. He saw kindness, compassion, and a genuine love for him, not for his farm, but for him. He realized that she wasn't looking at his muddy clothes or his calloused hands. She was looking at his heart. He had always admired Lydia's beauty and her elegance, but he had come to love her for something much more important: her kind heart. He had seen her transform from a lonely, unhappy woman into a joyful, vibrant one. He had watched her embrace the challenges of farm life, working hard and learning new things. He had witnessed her compassion for the land and her unwavering commitment to helping him. He knew that she could have any man she wanted, men with wealth, status, and power. But she had chosen to spend her time with him, a simple farmer. He knew that she loved him for who he was, not for what he had. "Lydia," he said, his voice thick with emotion. I think I'm falling in love with you too. Not because of your money or your fancy clothes, but because of your kind heart and your beautiful soul." He took her hand in his fingers intertwining with hers. They stood there in the middle of the cornfield, two souls connected by a shared love for the land and a deep appreciation for each other. They knew that their lives would never be the same. They had found something truly special, something that money could never buy: true love. Lydia knew that she couldn't stay in her big, fancy house any longer. It was filled with memories of a life that no longer felt like her own. It was a symbol of the wealth and status that had once defined her but now seemed empty and meaningless. She made a decision: she would sell her big house and move into a smaller house near Jacob's farm. She didn't need all that space, all that luxury. All she needed was Jacob and the simple joys of farm life. She put her house on the market and it sold quickly. Her former friends were shocked. They couldn't believe that she would give up such a beautiful home. They whispered that she had truly lost her mind. But Lydia didn't care what they thought. She was excited about her new life. She found a cozy little cottage just a short walk from Jacob's farm. It was small and simple, but it was perfect. It had a big kitchen, a sunny living room, and a garden where she could grow flowers. She sold most of her fancy furniture and bought simple, comfortable pieces that reflected her new lifestyle. She gave away her beautiful dresses and filled her closet with practical clothes for working on the farm. She was finally shedding the skin of her old life and embracing her true self. She was no longer a wealthy widow living in a marble mansion. She was a farmer, a lover, and a friend. She was home. She couldn't wait to start her new life with Jacob, a life filled with love, laughter, and the simple joys of the farm. She was ready to trade the silence of her marble halls for the sounds of nature, the emptiness of her heart for the warmth of true love. She was ready to build a future with Jacob, a future that was as bright and promising as the rising sun over the cornfield. With Lydia living nearby, their days were filled with even more joy and laughter. They worked side by side on the farm, planting seeds in the spring, tending to the crops in the summer, and harvesting the bounty in the fall. They were a team, supporting each other, encouraging each other, and sharing the rewards of their hard work. Lydia's garden flourished, bursting with colorful flowers and fragrant herbs. She learned how to make jams and jellies from the fruits of her garden, filling her pantry with homemade goodness. She also started a small vegetable patch, growing tomatoes, peppers, and cucumbers for their meals. They ate simple, wholesome meals together, cooked with fresh ingredients from the farm. They sat on the porch in the evenings, watching the sunset and listening to the crickets chirp. They talked about their dreams, their hopes, and their fears. They shared their hearts with each other, building a bond that was stronger than any storm. They explored the countryside together, hiking through the woods, swimming in the creek, and picnicking in the meadows. They discovered hidden waterfalls and secret trails, marveling at the beauty of nature. They helped their neighbors, sharing their harvest and offering their assistance whenever it was needed. They became an integral part of the community, spreading kindness and generosity wherever they went. They were truly happy. They had found love, purpose, and fulfillment in their simple life on the farm. They had learned that true happiness wasn't about wealth or status, but about connection, compassion, and the joy of living in harmony with nature. They had found their happily ever after not in a fancy mansion or at a glittering party, but in a muddy cornfield with each other. Lydia finally understood what truly mattered in life. She had spent so many years chasing after wealth and status, believing that they would bring her happiness. But she had been wrong. True happiness wasn't about having the biggest house or the fanciest clothes. It was about having love, purpose, and connection. She had learned that true love wasn't about finding someone who could give her material possessions or social standing. It was about finding someone who loved her for who she was, someone who saw her heart and appreciated her soul. She had also learned that happiness wasn't about sitting around and doing nothing. It was about working hard, contributing to the world, and making a difference in the lives of others. It was about finding something that gave her life meaning and purpose. She realized that she had wasted so many years on things that didn't matter. She had been so focused on acquiring wealth that she had forgotten to appreciate the simple joys of life, the beauty of nature, the warmth of human connection, and the satisfaction of hard work. Now she had everything she needed. She had Jacob, the love of her life. She had the farm, a place where she could connect with nature and contribute to the community. And she had purpose, a reason to wake up every morning with a smile on her face. She knew that she would never go back to her old life. She had found something much more valuable than money. She had found true love and happiness. And that was something that she would cherish forever. Her heart was full. Lydia and Jacob decided to get married. They didn't want a fancy wedding in a grand ballroom. They wanted a simple, heartfelt celebration on the farm, surrounded by the people they loved. They transformed the cornfield into a magical wedding venue. They strung twinkling lights between the stalks, creating a canopy of stars. They set up long tables adorned with wildflowers and candles. They hired a local band to play country music, filling the air with joyful melodies. They invited all their friends, both old and new. Lydia's former wealthy friends came, curious to see what her new life was like. They were surprised by the warmth and authenticity of the celebration. They saw the love between Lydia and Jacob, and they realized that they had been wrong about her. They understood that she had found something truly special, something that they had been missing in their own lives. Jacob's farming friends came, bringing their families and their homemade dishes. They celebrated with Lydia and Jacob, welcoming her into their community with open arms. Lydia wore a simple white dress, adorned with lace and wildflowers. Jacob wore his best overalls, cleaned and pressed. They exchanged vows under the setting sun, promising to love and cherish each other for the rest of their lives. They danced the night away, surrounded by their loved ones. They laughed, they cried, and they celebrated their love. It was the most beautiful wedding anyone had ever seen. It was a testament to their love, their commitment, and their unwavering belief in the power of simple joys. The farm, once just Jacob's livelihood, was now the symbol of their love. Lydia and Jacob lived happily ever after on the farm. They continued to grow food, sharing their harvest with their neighbors and friends. They taught children about the importance of nature and the value of hard work. They opened their hearts to everyone they met, spreading love and kindness wherever they went. Their love story became a legend in the community. People would come from miles around to visit the farm, hoping to catch a glimpse of the happy couple and learn the secret to their joy. Lydia and Jacob would welcome them with open arms, sharing their stories and their wisdom. They would tell them about the importance of following their hearts, of embracing simplicity, and of finding love in the most unexpected places. They grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They watched the seasons change, the corn grow tall, and the flowers bloom. They lived a life filled with purpose, connection, and true happiness. And as they sat on their porch, watching the sunset over the cornfield, they knew that they had found something truly special. They had found a love that was stronger than any storm, a happiness that was more valuable than any treasure, and a life that was richer than any dream. They had found their happily ever after, not in a fairy tale, but in the real world, in a muddy cornfield with each other. Their love story proved that true love can bloom anywhere, even in the most unexpected places, as long as you open your heart and believe in the power of simple joys.